The price of a cheap second-hand car or brand new smartphone. That's how much a sex slave in Europe will cost today, according to one former people trafficker we've spoken to. What is actually being done to fight the trade in human beings? Welcome to On the Front Line.
It's very simple. I'll bring you a chick now. Of course, you have to play your role as a buyer. You're a rich guy from God knows where. The stupid girl will take the bait in 3 seconds. You wrap her up, you take her with you, and then it's up to you. After all, you're in your country, aren't you?
The voice there of one former people trafficker we spoke to in Romania. Miria Vasiliadou, you're the EU's anti-trafficking coordinator. More than 30,000 victims of human trafficking were identified between 2010 and 2012. How can it possibly be claimed that the current strategy to deal with this is sufficient?
A lot is being done at the European level, especially in the last few years. We have excellent EU legislation that civil society is very keen to see being implemented, as well, of course, as the member states, and we have fantastic policy. At the EU level, we have done everything that we could.
Yeah, that's at the EU level. How do you enforce this?
Well, what needs to be done now is that all the member states need to, first of all, translate EU law into national law, and then at the second stage, which is the most important, is to implement this law. And if we do implement the law, then we stand a very big chance to help victims and potential victims.
OK. Glyn Lewis, let me come to you. You're the Director of Specialised Crime and Analysis at Interpol.
Yeah.
Does the EU's open borders make policing this crime more difficult?
Yeah, I think so. Having the Schengen area, for example, does mean that there's a lot of movement of those that may be trafficked. So I think, yes, it is easier, and that's why it's happening more in Europe.
How is it possible to crack down on these organised criminal gangs that perpetrate these crimes because of the free movement?
Look, it's very important for those that are working in some form of frontline activities, and even private enterprise, for example, the airline industry, for staff to realise or be able to identify some of the things that would indicate someone is being trafficked. And there are a range of things there that we want.
They're not very good at it, though, are they, at the moment?
No, well, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because it's a very complex crime type. It's mixed with people wanting to do it to a degree or not understanding what they're being deceived to do. They may be coerced in a way that you don't understand or forced in a way that you're not sure about. So it's a very, very difficult crime to identify.
OK. Romania remains one of the top source countries in the EU for human trafficking. This is what one former sex trafficker had to tell us.
It's pretty widespread. I don't count the big cities. It's pretty substantial in the villages. It's about young girls, poorly educated, wanting to get a life. They're easily hooked. If you wear nice clothes, have a nice car, you simply get them with you. You show them Bucharest. You show them around. You take them to the nightclubs. You promise them love and so on. The best age, in order to make money, is over 19 or 20 years old. Of course, you can make money with the younger ones, 14, 15 years old, but they're so unpredictable. And the younger they are, you risk getting a much heavier prison sentence. Sometimes we blackmailed them, filmed them or told them they've been filmed. But the fact is we fooled them, telling them things like, OK, I'm going to show it to the whole village and the whole village will see what you've done and what you've been doing. So we got them like that. I made them believe that they were freer than at home. Because a prostitute can sleep with 40 or 50 men in 8 hours and she doesn't even get tired. For her, it's not work or stress or anything like that. If you let her feel free and she sees that the money is pouring in and that everything is OK, that she's free to shop, to buy whatever she wants, but then she will still only consume about 10% of what she actually produces in a month. I sold them when I understood they were not into it anymore and they were showing signs of wanting to run away.
How much did you sell the girls for?
At least 800 euros, but often more than 1,500, 2,000, even 3,000 euros, depending on the chick. Love's a good trade, believe me. It's much simpler. Now, brother, you can take 3 or 4 girls and you tell them, let's go whoring, let's do the Italians, let's do the Germans. And they're like, let's go, let's do it. Instead of being here in little Romania with only 100 lei, let's go there for 50, 100 euros.
I'd like to go to Jana Matti, who joins us from Bucharest. Jana Matti, you run an NGO that helps girls that have been trafficked. We've just heard that love is a good trade. What is actually being done to eradicate this, and is it enough? Is enough being done?
Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone, your guests. Yeah, definitely we took measures, but to keep it short, we are always one step behind the traffickers. Once upon a time, they're very flexible, very well organized, communicating very easy. We can only follow them, and our laws are rigid. We have to go by the law. We have to wait for the Rogatory Commission and so on and so forth. Now they decentralize. They move in small cells. Sometimes there are family businesses, if you can call them. And this is exactly the principle that works very well, the lover-boy method, because it's so much easier to control the girls in this way. And it's very, very difficult to identify, as it was mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Glyn, how do you identify the victims and how do you catch the traffickers?
Police are very busy on the front line. They need to know very clearly, specifically, and others as well, what are very clear indicators of someone being trafficked. And it's often someone that appears to have no freedom, no control of their life. They may not be getting the income that's promised. They may be forced. They may be physically harmed. They may have bruising and other things as well. But often they'll look like they're being trapped. They're controlled. But as was said, it's very difficult there. It's under the ground. It's in the back streets. People moving in and out. So it is very difficult.
Okay, we've just heard, Miria, from Jana. The traffickers are always one step ahead of the authorities. You've obviously got a strategy, but isn't there a danger this strategy will just become redundant because the traffickers will just respond to it in a different way?
I don't necessarily think so. I think it is a case of ensuring that we implement the instruments that we have rather than just talk about them. And I do think that if we properly implement EU law, we do stand a chance. But the question is that trafficking is necessarily a question of profits and money for illegal sectors, and it's about demand. So it is the demand that we have to reduce. Who are the clients of those women who are forced into providing services that they don't want to?
Okay, I'd like to go back to Jana Matti. Jana Matti, it's about stifling the demand here. What do you say to that? When
we talk about sexual exploitation, then we go legalizing or abolishing prostitution, and we go into these debates, endless debates and unuseful debates, because trafficking is not about sex. Let's make it clear. Trafficking is about power and money. And we have to look to who has the power, who has the money, the trafficker, of course. One other problem that I have when we talk about trafficking and the measures that have been taken by the governments, if you follow the money, you will see that the governments allocate very little money. I want the law enforcement to have the money to fight the crime, and I want increased penalties, because trafficking is a low risk and high profit crime.
These people are responsible for the slave trade. Glyn, why are the sentences and convictions so dismally low for this?
Well, I think because it is mixed up with sex work that in some ways is legal, and sex workers choose to do that work, and that's mixed up with those that are actually coerced.
In some cases, especially victims that come from outside Europe, they end up in jail. They actually get prosecuted. So how does that encourage somebody to actually testify against their traffickers?
Well, this is again wrapped up in awareness, not only for law enforcement officers, but as the judiciary and others as well, about what are the indicators of someone being trafficked and someone that's been forced in. And that only comes with police knowing what evidence they need to gather and how to identify a victim and actually getting the psychological support that that victim most likely will need to provide evidence that the police can use then to prosecute.
Okay. Jana Matti, is there any understanding by police forces, these agencies, of how many of these women fall into the hands of the traffickers?
One problem that we have, as we all know, Eastern European countries are generally speaking origin countries, and these countries, let's say they are poor countries, they just come up after 40 years of communism, and then trafficking and corruption are a match made in heaven. And we all know that in Eastern European countries there is corruption. And only if you look at the open information that we have in the mass media, you have politicians involved in trafficking. Okay. And my question is, how can a police officer investigate the case if the phone that he receives from his boss says stop there?
Miri Vassiliadou, what do you do about that?
This is up to the member states and not up to the European Commission to decide how the prosecution will be run at the member state level. The legislation is very clear that member states have to have measures in place so that this doesn't happen.
The legislation is there, but in practice it's not the case.
And this is the message I keep trying to convey, that we do have the law, and as long as we encourage and we ensure that the member states comply with that legislation, we really do stand a chance.
Okay, how will you judge this strategy? What will you deem a success? What will you deem a failure?
What I think is a success is when the civil society, the member states, the European Parliament, parliamentarians at the member states, they're all behind the strategy and they feel that this is the right way ahead. I don't want to think that we're lacking behind the traffickers. I'd like to think that we are trying to address the problem in different dimensions and how to best ensure that we implement what we promise.
Okay, I'm afraid we've run out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks to you all so much for being on the front line. That's it for this edition. You can find us on social media, YouTube, as well as Euronews.com. We'll be back next month. Until then, thanks for watching.